$64.8 billion. This is the staggering sum that disappeared. Not over a weekend, but over decades, swallowed by pure deception. This isn't a story of common theft. This is the chronicle of the largest financial crime ever committed by a single person. It is the story of Bernard Madoff. For 30 years, he was untouchable. The visionary who helped create the National Association of Securities Dealers, Automated Quotations, or NASDAQ. He was a legend on Wall Street, running a private firm that promised impossible stability. While the markets raged, Madoff's clients always saw returns, every quarter, without fail. He had the golden touch, or so they believed. But the success was hollow. The genius was a phantom. The stability was a performance, meticulously staged to hide the lie. The facade finally began to crack in December 2008. As the global financial crisis reached a fever pitch, Madoff ran out of new money to pay the old investors. The clock stopped ticking. On December 11, 2008, the ultimate climax began. Madoff called his two sons, Mark and Andrew Madoff, to his luxurious, secretive office. In that room, under immense pressure, the patriarch confessed. He used 4 words that instantly pulverized his reputation, shattered his family, and ignited a crisis across the world. He simply said, "It's all one big lie." The truth revealed that the man everyone trusted was the world's most notorious fraudster. The money was gone. The trust was gone. And the manhunt by the Federal Bureau of Investigation was just beginning. To understand the immense fallout, we need to go back to the moment the illusion was born. Bernard Madoff built his entire world on a foundation of calculated arrogance and manufactured exclusivity. He didn't just become wealthy, he became a deity. Madoff didn't ask for your money, he made you beg to invest. This deliberate scarcity was his first masterstroke. His private fund was shrouded in secrecy, accessible only through whispers and referrals among the ultra-elite. He offered not just returns, but membership into a club of untouchable wealth. While the world suffered market crashes, Madoff's statements reported immaculate, consistent profits. This consistency, this perfect immunity to market gravity, was the lie that sealed the deal. The investment strategy Madoff sold was complex, called split-strike conversion. It sounded brilliant, legally sound, and utterly impenetrable to the average investor. But Madoff never executed a single trade. Never. He was running the most primitive scam, a Ponzi scheme on the most sophisticated people in the world. He funded the returns of the old investors entirely with the fresh, eager capital of the new ones. It was a conveyor belt of cash, always moving, always needing fuel. The true headquarters of this fraud was not the bright, impressive trading floor. It was the infamous 17th floor of the Lipstick Building. This was Madoff's inner sanctuary, sealed off, technologically dark, and accessible only by a handful of trusted employees. While the legitimate parts of the firm boasted cutting-edge tech, the 17th floor operated like a 19th-century forgery house. There were no trading terminals, no direct connection to the market. Their singular, terrifying task was printing. They fabricated millions of pages of trade confirmations, account statements, and financial reports, all detailing transactions that never happened. This team of loyalists created a fictional economy, an entire shadow market existing only on paper. And the world let him. Financial analyst Harry Markopolos saw the red flags early. He repeatedly approached the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, with mathematical proof, literal documents showing Madoff's returns were impossible. He wasn't just ignored, he was dismissed. Madoff's stature, his political connections, and his flawless facade were a shield strong enough to deflect the truth. The arrogance of Madoff became his greatest defense. He didn't just fool his clients. He openly mocked the regulators who were too complacent or too intimidated to look closer. The fortress was built, the money flowed. The deception was complete. But a system dependent on continuous growth is a system waiting to collapse. Madoff's Ponzi scheme needed constant, fresh blood to survive. And as the global market seized up in late 2008, the flow of new capital dried up. The inevitable had arrived. The golden god of Wall Street was about to be undone by the very greed he had mastered. The year 2008 was the fire that consumed the financial world. And every fire exposes those who stand too close. As the markets began their catastrophic plunge with Lehman Brothers collapsing, and the entire banking system teetering on the brink, Madoff's clients weren't panicked about losing money. They were panicked about liquidity. They needed cash, and they knew Madoff was the one man who could deliver reliable returns, no matter what. This was the fatal flaw. A Ponzi scheme is a zero-sum game. It relies on new money continually covering the withdrawals of the old. But in the midst of the deepest financial panic since the Great Depression, the influx of fresh capital stopped entirely. Worse, the panic triggered a frantic run on the bank. Clients demanded the return of their principal. Madoff needed billions of dollars, instantly. For weeks, Madoff scrambled. The man who projected absolute calm was internally facing a financial earthquake. He knew the end was near, but he couldn't let go of the facade. He tried to maintain the perfect lie, even as the requests for withdrawals reached a fever pitch, hundreds of millions, then over $1 billion, all demanded back by people who believed their money was safe. By early December, the hole was too deep. The system was insolvent. Madoff was faced with the ultimate choice: try to run, or face the music. His conscience, or perhaps just his desperation, forced his hand. On December 10, 2008, he called his wife, Ruth Madoff, and told her the truth. But the climax was yet to come. The climax was reserved for his two sons, the men who had worked by his side for years, Mark and Andrew Madoff. He summoned them to the office the following day. The air was thick with the weight of impending doom. He didn't ease into it. He didn't prevaricate. He looked his own sons in the eye and delivered the crushing blow. He confessed to them that his entire private investment business was a fraud. It was a lie that had devoured decades and billions. He confessed that he had no money, no trades, and that everything they believed about their father was fictional. The sheer horror of the revelation was instantaneous. Mark and Andrew Madoff were not complicit. They were victims of the same monstrous deception. The man they revered as a financial genius was nothing more than a common criminal. The choice they faced was impossible: protect their father, or protect the victims of the largest betrayal in financial history. Mark and Andrew made their decision instantly, choosing truth over blood. They were the ones who finally called the authorities. The stage was set. The perfect crime had finally been exposed, not by the regulators who should have seen it, but by the devastating power of the global economy, and the moral courage of his own children. The god had fallen, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation was about to knock on his door. The son's confession was the detonator. Within hours of the phone call from Mark and Andrew Madoff, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, mobilized. They didn't just walk into Madoff's office. They descended upon him with the speed and precision reserved for counter-terrorism operations. This wasn't a complex, years-long pursuit. It was a swift execution of justice, fueled by the most devastating confession in Wall Street history. On December 12, 2008, as Madoff sat in his luxurious Manhattan apartment, FBI agents arrived. They quickly took him into custody. The scene was surreal. The man who had dined with kings and dictated markets was now being escorted out by federal agents. His hands cuffed, a visual representation of the final, absolute collapse of his authority. The criminal case began almost immediately, but the investigation was only just starting. What the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) quickly discovered was staggering. They weren't dealing with a case of simple accounting fraud. They were dealing with a black hole. Investigators swarmed the 17th floor, the supposed engine room of Madoff's success. What they found wasn't a sophisticated trading system, but a small, dusty operation manned by a few loyal associates. They found boxes upon boxes of files, all containing the fraudulent paper trail, millions of pages of fake statements, all detailing trades that were completely fictitious. The split-strike conversion strategy Madoff had touted was pure fiction. The only true asset was the money flowing in from new investors, and that money was gone. Madoff had essentially used his investment advisory business as his personal bank account, funding his extravagant lifestyle, buying yachts, and maintaining multiple properties. The official charge brought against him was securities fraud, though the public and the victims called it by its true name: betrayal. The prosecution's case was deceptively simple. Unlike many complex financial crimes that take years to unravel through complex paper trails, Madoff's fraud was, in its essence, simple theft. The complexity lay only in the sophistication of the victim pool and the sheer scale of the lie. The indictment charged him with 11 federal felonies, including securities fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, perjury, and money laundering. It must be noted that throughout the initial proceedings, the prosecution alleged that Madoff had run the decades-long scheme entirely by himself, with the aid of only a handful of senior staff who executed the printing and filing. The sons, Mark and Andrew Madoff, who reported the crime, were never charged, confirming their role as whistleblowers. Madoff initially claimed his crime was victimless, an attempt to hide trading losses from his family, but as the investigation deepened, the full list of victims was compiled: ordinary pensioners, charities, universities, and international banks. The emotional and financial carnage was almost impossible to measure. Thousands of people saw their life savings, their retirement security, and their entire legacies wiped out by the greed of one man. Faced with overwhelming evidence, and the moral weight of his actions, Madoff finally waived his right to trial. On March 12, 2009, Bernard Madoff stood before a judge and pleaded guilty to all 11 counts. The guilty plea spared the public from a long, agonizing trial, but it did nothing to bring back the lost capital. The focus now shifted from proving guilt to delivering justice and recovering the staggering losses. The trial was over, but the reckoning was just beginning. The question was no longer if Madoff was guilty, but how high the price for this unprecedented betrayal would be, and what the world could possibly learn from the wreckage he left behind. On June 29, 2009, the world watched as Bernard Madoff faced his victims in court. The courtroom was filled with the raw emotion of thousands of people who had been financially and emotionally decimated by his fraud. Madoff offered a shallow apology, claiming he was profoundly sorry for his crimes. But for the victims, those words were meaningless compared to the $64.8 billion that had vanished. The judge delivered a sentence that reflected the colossal scale of the betrayal: 150 years in federal prison. This was a symbolic sentence, designed to ensure Madoff would die behind bars, never again posing a threat to the financial system or the public trust. It was the absolute end of the Madoff dynasty. But the consequences didn't stop with Madoff's imprisonment. The devastating shame and public humiliation led to tragic outcomes, including the suicide of his son, Mark Madoff, 2 years after his father's arrest. This case proved that financial crimes do not just steal money, they destroy families, reputations, and lives, often extending far beyond the main perpetrator. So, when we look back at the rise and fall of this financial empire, the key question remains: why was he caught? Madoff was not brought down by the brilliant, aggressive investigation that should have happened years before. He was brought down by the very fragility of his own scheme, combined with the global financial crisis of 2008. His Ponzi scheme was a greedy monster that needed constant feeding. When the market seized and the flow of new capital stopped, Madoff could no longer pay the withdrawals, and the lie instantly became visible. His greed, coupled with the extraordinary pressure of a worldwide panic, was his executioner. But the greater question is, what do we learn from this colossal failure of trust? The lesson is a timeless one. Never substitute fame for due diligence. Never allow yourself to be excluded from asking critical questions. Madoff operated under the mantra that if a deal is exclusive, it must be valuable. We learned that if a return seems too good to be true, if it is miraculously untouched by market reality, it is the first sign of deception. In the world of finance, skepticism is not a defect, it is self-defense. We created secret files to pull back the curtain on these dark corners of human behavior, and expose the mechanics behind the world's most shocking cases. By understanding how they were caught, we can better protect ourselves. If you believe that the truth behind the crime is the ultimate defense, and if you want to keep exploring the darkest files of history with us, make sure you subscribe to Secret Files right now, and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching this chapter on the definitive collapse of Bernard Madoff's empire. The case is closed, but the lesson endures. Until the next file, stay vigilant.